All right, guys, here we go. Today we're going to take notes on DNA. So if you would open up a new page in OneNote and title it Notes DNA. Or if you want, you can get a Cornell note sheet and do your notes handwritten. But they should also be titled Notes DNA. Your essential question for today should also be recorded. The essential question is, how is DNA structured and organized? How is DNA structured and organized?
That's the essential question.
Yep. Today's date is November 30th. B-Day classes, you should put today's date as December 1st. All right, today we're going to cover kind of three main topics regarding DNA. Its structure, its organization, and we're going to also talk about some similarities and differences in regards to structure and organization between different types of organisms, different species. Okay, so we're going to build off of the information you learned in your article that we read last class. Okay, as a quick review, we already know this. Okay, the function of DNA. One of the four molecules that we learned last unit was nucleic acids. Right? We learned carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Okay? Nucleic acids refers to this DNA stuff. Okay? What did we say that DNA does? What is its job? It gives us our traits.
Passes down
Heredity.
heredity.
Okay, so this is our hereditary information. Okay, so the function of DNA is that it's storing all of that genetic information, all of that hereditary information that can be passed from one generation to the next. Okay. As you already pointed out, it also carries the code for our physical traits, which is why when you see people that have very similar DNA sequences, they have similar traits. So think about you and your family members. You likely have some traits that make you look like you belong together. Okay? And then when you look at different species, humans all have certain traits that make them look like humans. Whereas, let's say dogs have different traits that make them look like dogs. Okay, that's encoded within the DNA. Okay. One thing that we may not think about as often is that your DNA actually interacts with the environment. Okay, and we're going to talk about that more as we move into second semester. But the environment actually can kind of provide signals to your DNA, telling it to express certain traits or not. So, in a sense, turning your DNA on or off at times. Okay? Then finally, our DNA is what creates similarities and differences between organisms. So that is within a species. So if we consider humans, our DNA is what creates similarities between us and differences between us. But it also refers to similarities and differences between species. So the fact that our DNA is different than that of a fish is what makes us have different traits and behave differently. Look and behave differently. Okay? All right, let's talk structure. So this should hopefully be review a bit of review from the article that we read. Okay, so structure of DNA. All right. The article that we read used this new word, that helix word. Okay. Who can remind me what helix means? Yeah.
It like makes the DNA kind of like twist and like make it littler so that it more can fit
Into a space.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so this double helix refers to, the twisted ladder shape. Okay, so twisted ladder shape. And if you want, you can even draw yourself a little picture like the one that's up here on the screen to give you an example of what that shape looks like. Okay. So as you pointed out, DNA, its structure is that it's very thin and it's twisted. So it twists and then it kind of twists upon itself and twists upon itself even more, so it can get really coiled up tightly so that it can fit into very small spaces like a cell, and even smaller than that, like the nucleus inside of a cell. Okay? So its structure is thin and twisted so that it can fit inside of the nucleus of a cell. I feel like our article did a really nice job talking about these basic units called nucleotides. Okay, so the basic unit of DNA is a nucleotide. And what are the three main parts of a nucleotide? A, T, C, and G, which are types of bases. So we have bases is one part of a nucleotide. Cooper?
Phosphate.
A phosphate. And then the third part of a nucleotide is a sugar. And what specific type of sugar? That big word, deoxyribose. A deoxyribose sugar. Okay? So nucleotides, remember, have three main parts. The bases that form the rungs of a ladder, a deoxyribose sugar, and a phosphate. Okay? If I were you, I would take a minute and I would sketch myself a little picture. So remember, a nucleotide might look something like this. Okay? A sugar, okay, so here's the sugar, and that sugar is connected to a phosphate, and then that sugar is also connected to a base, and in this case we could make our base whatever letter we want it to be. Let's make it a T.
Does that say form rungs?
It does.
Is it supposed to say rings?
The rungs of a ladder. So kind of like the steps of a ladder. Okay? So this right here would be one nucleotide. Okay? One nucleotide. Okay, and remember T stands for thymine. Okay? So the bases are what form the kind of the steps, the middle part of this ladder. And then the sugar and the phosphate are what make the sides of the ladder, which are sometimes called like the backbone. And there I need to erase my nucleotide. Can I erase the nucleotide?
Hold on.
Did you guys get it drawn? I'll pause for a second. Yep,
On the test, are we going to know what A, T, C, and G are, like actual names?
the names adenine, thymine. On the test, I would expect you to be able to recognize those words, but not necessarily produce them. So if I ask you to produce something, A, T, C, or G is sufficient. But I would expect that if I use the word thymine, you would recognize that that's the T base. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. How are we doing? Can I erase this nucleotide drawing? Okay, just so that you can see and write down that the sugar and the phosphate are what are forming the sides of the ladder, okay? So on our picture here, these kind of red ribbons, those are formed from the sugars and phosphates, okay? The bases are all in the center part of the ladder, okay? You with me so far? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, or sideways thumb. Tell me how you're doing. Great. We're going to move on. All right. We know that our bases pair in certain ways. Okay, our article talked a lot about this the other day, that the bases have complementary shapes. They kind of fit together like puzzle pieces. The A and the T like to pair together, and the C and the G pair together. Okay, so their shapes complement each other, and they can be bonded together. Okay, A and T, C and G. Now, how do we get from like one tiny nucleotide to all of your DNA? Because you have a lot of DNA, okay? So it starts to organize itself in lots of different ways. So let's start talking about then the organization of DNA. Okay, the organization of DNA. Okay? Just a moment ago, we said that the building blocks were nucleotides. Okay, so I'm going to draw us a picture here for a second of that nucleotide we had just built. Okay, we had drawn a T nucleotide. Okay, and that was the individual building block of DNA. Now, what should T partner up with? An A. Okay, so here we're going to have an A nucleotide that it also partners up with. Okay, when they have partnered up, when two nucleotides partner up, this is now called a base pair. Okay, so I would draw this in your notes with me. Okay, so what I'm putting in dots, that's a nucleotide. Okay? When I refer to the whole thing, I'm going to go bigger dots, dash line. All of that together forms what we call a base pair. So two nucleotides bonded together is a base pair. Now, if I take a whole bunch of base pairs and I start stringing them together, I can form a gene. So a whole lot of base pairs formed together makes a gene. A gene is a really important section of DNA because it now really codes for something. Okay? Your genes code for protein. And do you remember what proteins do for us? Ooh, dig deep. Last unit. Chadley?
Structure?
They do help us provide, they give us structure, right? So there are structures in our cell membranes that are proteins. Your muscles are protein. You have some structures in your skin and your bones. Those are proteins that help give you the shape that you are. Okay? If we were to talk even more generically, our proteins give us like our physical traits. Okay? So genes carry the instructions for how to make a protein, and in parentheses, let's put physical traits. Right? So the reason that your eyes are the color that they are is due to proteins. Well, what told your eyes to be that color? Your genes. Because your genes code for the protein, and the protein is what causes your eyes to be the color that they are, to have that pigment. Okay? So your physical traits are coded for in your genes. Okay? When I take many, many, many of these genes and I line them all up together, and then I start to coil them up and wind them up in a really tight fashion, you form a chromosome. Okay, so a chromosome is formed from many, many genes, and it is tightly wound. So on this chromosome, and this is not reality, I'm kind of making this up just for an example, but if this chromosome has many genes, maybe one of your chromosomes has a gene for your eye color, and then next to that is a gene for your hair color, and then next to that is maybe a gene for how much muscle you put on, right? Some people put muscle on easier than other people, so kind of muscular development, a gene for that. Right? So many genes put together can be found on one chromosome. Okay? How many chromosomes do you have? 46. Okay? Where did you get them from? From your parents. That's that heredity piece, right? Now, you have 46 chromosomes in every single one of your body cells. And I use that word body cells specifically because next semester you're going to find out that your reproductive cells, the sex cells, are the exception to the rule. They don't have 46 chromosomes. Okay? They actually have half that number. We don't need to worry about that right now. Okay? But your body cells, your skin cells, your muscle cells, your stomach cells, your brain cells, they all have 46 chromosomes each. Okay? Those chromosomes come in pairs. So you actually have 23 pairs of chromosomes for a total of 46. The reason that they come in pairs is because you got half of your chromosomes from your mom and half of your chromosomes from your dad. Okay? So you have 23 pairs of chromosomes. 23 from mom and 23 from dad. Okay? So if we were to draw out, and we're not going to draw all of them, but I'm going to give you a short example. If you were to draw out of all 46 chromosomes, we might say you have a chromosome number 1 that you inherited from your mom, and a chromosome number 1 that you inherited from your dad. And they're the same shape, they're the same length, they have the same kind of genes. If you inherited a second chromosome from mom, there's chromosome number 2 that you inherited from dad. Chromosome number 3, it's shorter. And you inherited 2 of those, one from your mom, one from your dad. Okay, etc. So you inherited a chromosome of each size from each of your parents for 46 total. Okay? Everything that I have underlined on this slide refers to DNA. So if you did not underline the terms that I underlined, I would go back and do that right now. Okay? All of the words that I underlined refer to DNA. Okay? So if I'm talking about base pairs, I'm talking about DNA. If I refer to bases or nucleotides, we're talking about DNA. If I refer to chromosomes, we're talking about DNA. Genes, DNA. DNA is like the big umbrella term that refers to all of it. Okay? Okay, I want to pause here, and I want you to turn to your talking partner. And B-Day classes, I want you to pause here as well, and I want you to turn to your talking partner or your table group, and I want you to explain, how does this picture demonstrate all the different levels of organization that DNA can come in? Okay, turn to your partner. How does this picture show us all the different forms or levels of organization that DNA can come in? Have a 1-minute chat. Go.
Like mirror off of each other with colors. Like purple and yellow, and then at the very top you see the same thing. Like the reds are across from each other and the yellows are across from each other.
And then you can see
If that continues on, it just keeps then it'll make everything that you out.
what do you do now? So, like,
All right, wrap up those conversations. All right, we've got one last topic that we're going to cover, which is comparing DNA between organisms. Okay? So, if I'm referring to, let's see, pick an animal, a dog. Okay? If I want to compare the DNA in a dog to the DNA in a human, there are some things that are the same about our DNA, and there are some things that are different about our DNA. Okay? So, things that are the same. Things that are the same. Okay? Would be the shape. DNA, no matter what, if it's in a dog or a human or a tree, DNA is always in that double helix shape. Okay? Shape, always the same. The parts are the same. So, in a dog also has nucleotides that form genes, and genes that form chromosomes. So those levels of organization are the same. They still have the same 4 bases, A, T, C, and G. So just because it's a different animal does not mean that it has different bases. The bases are exactly the same. And DNA still does the same job. It stores genetic information for a dog, just like it stores genetic information for you. Okay? So the shape, the parts, and the function of DNA is still the same, always. However, you don't look like a dog, and you don't act like a dog.
Thank you.
Okay? Yeah, we're happy about that. Okay? The reason is because there are some differences in the DNA. You have 46 chromosomes in every single one of your cells. I don't know how many off the top of my head. I don't know how many chromosomes dogs have, but they don't have 46. So they have a different number of chromosomes. Okay? For some random reason, I feel like strawberries have 8 chromosomes. Not sure why I know that or why I'm thinking 8, but I feel like it's 8. Okay? They have a different kind of gene. Okay? They have genes that tell them to walk on all 4 legs. You have genes that dictate for you to walk on 2 legs. Okay? You have genes that do not develop into a full-blown tail. Dogs have genes that do cause them to develop a full-blown tail. Okay? So our genes are different, which causes us to have different traits. If their genes are different, that means the order of their nucleotides are different. So the sequence of their A's, T's, C's, and G's are different. And if the genes are different and the nucleotides are different, that means that the proteins they make will be different. And if they have different proteins, they will have different physical traits. Okay? Yes?
A strawberry actually has 14 chromosomes.
14. Thank you for correcting me. I'm not sure where 8 was coming from. Maybe, I don't know. Fruit fly?
All of them?
Find out what has 8. What is in my brain right now that I am not remembering?
This is really difficult to put next to each other.
Has 8 chromosomes?
Yes.
A raisin. A grape.
A grape?
A raisin.
Did you look that up? Do you know that for sure?
No, I'm
Okay.
guessing because it gets smaller and smaller. Because if a strawberry has 14, it's got to be smaller.
But I'm actually glad you bring that up. So just because an organism is less complex does not necessarily mean that it has fewer chromosomes.
Fruit flies
There's
have
some
8
big dogs.
chromosomes.
Fruit flies have 8. That must be what I was thinking about then.
Thank you.
Okay, but there are actually some organisms that are fairly, what we would consider simple, that have more chromosomes than we do, actually.
What? Like what?
A lizard.
Did you look up how many chromosomes they have?
No.
Oh.
Just guessing animals.
Grant, have you looked up comparison of number of chromosomes?
For what?
Just of different things? We'll do a quick search here.
The animal that has the most chromosomes is a hermit crab. Has basically 1,260 chromosomes.
A fruit fly has 8.
Fruit fly is 8. That's not the picture I was thinking of.
It ranges from 254 chromosomes to 1260. That's crazy. Hermit crabs.
Hermit crabs have how many?
They range from 254 to 1260.
Okay, so there's a good example, because I'm not finding a great example, the one I'm thinking of. But hermit crabs have far more chromosomes than we do. Probably not what we would
They have
expect
the most chromosomes in the world.
in the world. There you go. Okay? Thank you for that fact. All right. B-Day classes. If you have questions over this lecture, please jot them down in your notes so that I can address them next time. A-Day classes. What questions do you have at this point in time?